When I, female, was 15, my father disowned me because I wanted to move back in with my mother. There was a bit more to it, but not anything I could say that would make it sound less ridiculous. Because of this, I've been somewhat ostracized by my family. None of them agree with my dad and his crazy behavior, but they also understandably don't want to do anything to upset him. This means that I've been left out of many family events. It has hurt me a lot, but I get it. It's either me or my father who brings my 5 siblings. I have been to a total of 1 family event until now, my grandfather's funeral. Even then, my father threw a fit when he saw that I was there, told my grandmother that I didn't belong there. I cried and drank a lot. I didn't get to go to the family dinners, pretty much just the funeral, which was difficult enough because my grandfather died, but my dad made it so much more worse than necessary. Furthermore, my dad prevented any of my siblings from talking to me. Fast forward to tonight. My favorite cousin was getting married. He is pretty much everyone's favorite member of the family. Kind, loving, warm-hearted, just an amazing person. He let me know several months ago that I was invited, and he wasn't going to let family drama prevent me from going. He also called my father to inform him I was attending, and he needed to deal with it. From what I understand, my dad's only response was, "Just don't seat us at the same table." Not only was I happy for my cousin, but I was so grateful to just be invited after being left out for 14 years. I promised my cousin and my grandmother that I wouldn't cause a scene, and I didn't. So I didn't go to the rehearsal dinner because I thought it would be easier. I sat in the very back during the ceremony and not with the rest of my family, and I sat at a separate table during the reception. I did everything in my power to stay away from causing a scene. The only mistake I made was I waited until my dad went outside, and I went over to give my oldest sister a hug and talk to her. The entire time, which was a total of 2 minutes, we were both watching the door like a hawk to make sure my dad didn't walk in. But my aunt took that time to very loudly and extremely harshly remind me that I needed to leave because my dad would lose his crap if he saw me sitting there talking to my ducking sister. Rather than respond and cause a scene, I got up and went back to my date at the table and started to cry. I mean, I couldn't even say hello to my sister without there being a problem for duck's sake. My grandmother came over to console me and tell me that she didn't want me to leave, and she was glad I came. One of my other aunts came over to tell me how ridiculous my Aunt Susan was being, and it wasn't my fault at all. I did nothing wrong. All of a sudden, I see 2 of my cousins standing up and arguing and start pushing each other. My cousin Courtney, my Aunt Susan's daughter, and my cousin Sarah, my Aunt Kathy's daughter, the aunt who came to console me. Both of my aunts go to break it up, while my Aunt Michelle, the groom's mother, begs them not to do this. I ask my Uncle Nelson's wife what happened, and she lets me know that it is because of me. Sarah went to tell my Aunt Kathy about what Aunt Susan was saying, and Courtney was standing up for Susan. It was a ducking crap storm. I had promised my cousin I wouldn't let this happen, and here it was, happening. I decided it would be best if I just left. I wanted to remove myself from the situation since my presence was causing the problem. I told my date that we needed to leave, and we ended up getting a ride back to the hotel. At the hotel, my Aunt Kathy, whose family also decided it would be better to just leave, came to tell me how much it wasn't my fault, even though I feel incredibly responsible. I went to apologize to my cousin Sarah because it pretty much ruined everyone's night, though thankfully the bride and groom were not aware of the situation. And I drank because it was the only way I know how to cope with this. My date, my ex, who was fully aware of the entire situation, was very supportive and understanding. So I'm glad I brought him. I needed someone who was just there for me, entirely separate from my family. Here's my problem, guys. I don't know how to move forward from this. I want to talk to my Aunt Susan, the scene causer, to put her in her place and make her understand just how hard this is for me to live with. But that isn't the right thing to do, right? As an adult, is it better for me just to ignore that? To pretend like it didn't happen? There is already enough grudge holding in my family, and I don't want to contribute to it. But I also want everyone to know that enabling my father's piss-poor behavior is what is causing the entire problem to begin with. What do I do? Edit. For the sake of clarity, I should probably explain that there is quite a big age difference between me and most of my siblings. They were very young when I moved back in with my mom. Hannah is the only one old enough to talk to me in her free time, and to even really remember me living there. I should also explain that the reason my family puts up with my dad is because he is manipulative and threatens to not let them see my other siblings. I get it, but as far as not talking to them, I tried that for 4 years. Right before I went to basic training, I spent a week with them. Again, my dad lives in New York, so seeing them is generally not a problem. I'm just not ever invited to things that involve the whole family. No one even hinted at the fact that there was going to be a family reunion the following week. So when pictures of everyone sans me popped up on Facebook, I was devastated. Not that I wasn't invited, but that no one thought to even give me a heads up when I had just seen them. So I didn't want to talk to anyone for a while. I was in the military in Alaska, so it was easy for a while to turn into 4 years. And then my grandfather died. I missed the last 4 years of my grandfather's because I was upset with my family. Not a day goes by that I don't regret that. And I don't want to hold the fact that my father is a worthless piece of crap against them because it isn't fair. But it is time for me to start standing up for myself more. You can't change idiots' minds, and your Aunt Susan and your dad are idiots from what you've written out here, in my opinion. Their minds do mental gymnastics to make what they think and do and say right, and everyone else wrong. And they aren't going to change their minds if you say anything to them. They're just going to cause more anger and hate in yourself towards them, towards yourself, towards everything. So my advice would be to just let it go with your Aunt Susan. Realize she's an a-hole and move on. I said it to someone else last night, and I'll say it again. Too much emphasis is put on family relationships. Yes, it would be awesome if they all worked and everyone got along and helped one another and looked out for each other's best interests. But this isn't always the case. Family members are humans too, and some of us have the unfortunate burden of having to have a-holes in our family who aren't helpful, supportive, or kind, and just make our life harder. My advice is to cut them out of your life the best you can. I get it's hard for you because your siblings seem kind and you want to keep contact with them, and that involves your dad, which then drags in your aunts and uncles, and it's just a crapstorm of a train wreck. But the best you can. Cut them out, and when you have to deal with them, let them say their ridiculous crap. Laugh at them for their stupidity. Thank them for wasting your time, and move along. Allow them to waste as little time of yours as possible, I guess is a more succinct way of saying what I'm trying to get at. You get one life. Don't let a-holes bring you down in it, family or not. It's not worth the time. Update. So, my cousin is getting married this weekend, the one who stood up for me, and I wasn't invited. I guess I expected as much, given what happened last time. I don't blame her, but I learned about it on Facebook. No one in my family had the courtesy to tell me beforehand. What's worse is that I actually live near most of them now. After last January, I told my family that I wasn't going to be around my Aunt Susan until she apologized to me. I felt it was time for me to stand up for myself and hold her responsible for her behavior. Well, of course, she isn't going to do that. If she was the type of person to own what she did, she probably wouldn't have done it in the first place. I still feel like I'm owed an apology, but whatever. I know that this wedding isn't about me. It's about my cousin, and I'm very happy for her. I like her future husband a lot. I'm trying to talk myself out of being hurt that no one even bothered to mention it to me, but I'm having a hard time. I am hurt. Edit. I should have been more clear about my family members. My dad has 3 siblings. My aunts Kathy, Michelle, and Susan. The last wedding was my Aunt Michelle's son, Greg. This wedding is my Aunt Kathy's daughter, Sarah. Involved in the altercation last time was my cousin Sarah and my cousin Courtney, who is Susan's daughter. Edit 2. I also should have been more clear about what I meant about my Aunt Susan, since some of you are saying I brought this on myself. I've made it very clear to my family that I won't be okay with my Aunt Susan until she apologizes. It's not like I expect her to mean it, but I feel I needed to stand up for myself for once. I wanted my family to know that I don't deserve to be treated like that. So, while I want her to apologize, and said that we won't be cool until that happens, I haven't refused to go anywhere if she was there, nor would I make a scene if she was. I would just go out of my way to avoid her. I don't create this issue. I'm just trying not to continually be the person who always falls on the sword. I thought about just really telling her off, but it didn't seem like the right thing to do. It was just important to me to finally tell my family for once that the situation wasn't okay. I'm not upset that I wasn't invited. At this point, I expect that. I'm upset that no one told me about it. It feels like 2009 all over again when I spent a week with my family, and a week later, I saw pictures of all of them on Facebook, and not one person told me that they were having a family reunion that I wasn't invited to. Just as reference, my biological father walked out on my mom and I when I was 3 years old. I was raised by my mom and my stepdad, who was the true father figure in my life. They got married when I was 9 years old. My mom and stepdad never prevented me from having a relationship with my biological father. In fact, neither of them have spoken badly about my father at all. They always tried their best to keep a fair, neutral relationship with him so that I wasn't negatively affected by the situation while growing up. My biological father never had a genuine interest in getting to know me as a person. He never calls or tries to come visit me. On top of everything else, he is a full-blown alcoholic, and when we do talk, he is usually drunk. When I do make the point to call him, the conversation is always about him, what he wants, what he is interested in, how his life is going, etc. He never asks about how I am doing, and if the topic just happens to be about me, it usually ends with him giving me unnecessary life advice. For example, he's never been to college, and I'm finishing up my PhD. He will give me a long list of advice about how to get a PhD and what I should be doing with it. It's really unhelpful. Anyways, even though he has always been a self-centered a-hole of a father, I still have tried very hard to include him in big events in my life. I did that because his parents, my paternal grandparents, did help significantly in raising me, and I have a strong relationship with them. However, when he does show up at these big events, he makes a point to ruin my day. At my high school graduation, he was upset that I wasn't going to a top-tier school. I was accepted to one, but didn't want to take out loans, and wasn't the valedictorian. I was 5th in my graduating class. At my college graduation, everyone already knew I was going to start my PhD program. He joked that I will never finish my PhD because getting a PhD is a long process, and he said that he knows I don't have what it takes to make it through. He said this at the dinner table in front of everyone there. Then, at my wedding 3 months ago, he really tried to ruin my big day. I would like to mention that he made a huge deal about what he was going to wear. He uses all of his money on alcohol, so he said he didn't have the money to buy nice clothes. I didn't want to exclude him from the celebration, so I rented him a tuxedo that was identical to my stepdad's and my father-in-law's. Our wedding was basically a staycation, so a lot of the guests arrived 2 to 3 days before the big day. My father arrived early too, and complained about missing days of work, and then proceeded to get plastered drunk every day. He couldn't even stand up. He kept falling on the floor because he was so drunk. I tried having a conversation with him about not drinking so much, but he was dismissive with my comments, so I stopped talking about it. Then, at the rehearsal dinner, he told me that he didn't want to wear the tuxedo for the wedding. He said he tried it on and it was uncomfortable. I asked if he had a different set of clothes to wear, and he pointed to his t-shirt and jeans and said that he was going to wear that to the wedding. When I told him no, his response was, "I'm your father, and you are supposed to accept me for who I am." I put this in capital letters because he screamed those words at me. That was the last straw. Honestly, I have been dealing with him for the last 30 years and tried my hardest to let it all go. But this time it was much different. I will totally admit it. I let him have it. I specifically brought up everything wrong he has purposefully done to me, and I told him he was a horrible father and a person, and I meant it, and I don't regret sticking up for myself. He said we should cut ties, and I agreed. I don't think that was the response he was looking for, because when I agreed with his statement, his mouth fell open. He mentioned it first. I just acknowledged. The next day, wedding day, he packed his bags and left without saying anything. Everyone was shocked except for my mom and me. I don't care if I never see my father again. It may sound cold, but I think it's the best choice for my well-being. The only thing worrying me is my relationship with my grandparents. I haven't called them for the past 3 months because I know they will be sad about what happened. They weren't at the wedding because they live in a different country and traveling would have been too difficult for their old age. I don't care about my father, but I do care about them. My grandparents are in their mid-80s, and I know they won't be around much longer. I don't want to stress them out in their old age. What do I do from here? Do I fake a relationship with my father for my grandparents' sake? Do I just tell them the truth, even though they might take my father's side? Let your dad continue his life circling down the drain. Be a good granddaughter. Go to your grandparents. Just tell them. Talk about your dad is not going to happen, and change the subject if they bring it up. You are an adult now and should have your own relationship with your grandparents, independent of your dad.